All right, so we're starting our next session, and this is focusing on the use of videos in using science songs to teach. And so we're going to hear from three distinguished panelists. We have Victor Coronel, Mary McClellan, and Sarah Slagle presenting in that order. And first up is Dr. Coronel. So thank you for joining us, Victor.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking about the use that I make and some of my friends make of songs that we just look at YouTube, and there are a great variety of songs now. Of course, has grown to millions of, or tens of millions actually, of songs. And they have a description of physical phenomena, sometimes unintended. They show a very beautiful example of a physics demo. So that's what I use. And those songs that I mentioned, I'll show specifically one of them in full, and the other one, because of shortness of time, only just little pieces, and I can refer you to a lot more, of course. Now, in my opinion, those videos have to have some general characteristics: simplicity and clarity of concept being presented, free of gender, race, and religious biases. And I must stress the importance of gender, at least I've taught engineering. And the last time I looked at the statistics, only about 16%, 16% of engineers in the United States are female. So obviously we are not doing a good job in bringing females into the engineering and the sciences, with the exception of biology, medicine. Also the same applies for race. In there, we do not have the percentage participation that would reflect the percentage population that they represent in the United States. So it has to be free of gender, race, religious biases. If possible, lyrics available on video. And then you have to be careful because a lot of these videos are are made using camera tricks in there. And so the experiment that they show you that is usually very surprising turns out to be just a trick of the camera. And then it should, if possible, be entertaining there. And in physics, we have not been doing a good job at teaching science, especially at the non-science majors. A lot of students are turned off by physics, and the physicists are trying to do something about it by developing books that can be used for a wider audience. For example, some of you may be familiar with some titles like The Physics for Future Presidents, The Science of Chocolate, How to Dunk a Donut, The Physics of Wall Street. So that on the same line, I think we can try to use some popular videos or songs, not necessarily that you have to sing, but that are already there and that reinforce the concept that physics is everywhere. It's an explanation of all phenomena in the world. Now, once you find that video, you have to download and save it because the situation in the web, as many of you know, hopefully, it's a very fluid situation. Sometimes a video is there and then they take it out. So you have to save it. And now that has been made easy because of the USBs, memory cards, you have iCloud, and you have other ways of making your material more portable. And the information a lot easier and very practical to share there. Besides that, you also have the access to full lectures. Particularly, I like the Caltech Mechanical Universe, and MIT, you have the classical physics, which are available on YouTube. And now many schools, both in our country and in other countries, are developing MOOCs, those massive online open courses, which are free, which are around the physics of everyday phenomena. So I strongly recommend that to you too. My first example is going to be an illustration of Newton's laws in a system that is known as the outward machine, which consists, as you see in figure 1, of a very light pulley on a nearly frictionless axle. Then you pass a string through the pulley, and then on one end you attach one mass, and on the other end the other mass. And a lot of students have the intuitive understanding that if the masses are the same, the system stays put. It doesn't move at all there. And for some reason, a lot of students think that if the mass is lower, that's the direction in which the system will move in there. But regardless of their positioning, if they are initially at rest, they will stay at rest. Now, you do a force diagram for the masses, and you will find out this. I'm doing this example in full just to show you how then it relates to the video. So you can find the acceleration of the masses. The masses are joined by the string, which is inextensible. It means it's not elastic at all. And so there's a constraint. That means a restriction on the system that if one mass moves a certain distance up, the other mass moves a certain distance down by the same amount. Therefore, their velocity is equal and opposite, and their accelerations are equal and opposite too. So you find that if you take the positive direction upwards, and then that's the formula for the acceleration of mass 1, and the opposite sign is the acceleration for 2 there. So when you do the analysis of the equation with the students, you can see from the equation on top that if mass 2 is bigger than mass 1, and then mass 2 goes down and mass 1 goes up, that means mass 1 accelerates upwards, so A1 is positive. And when M2 is less than M1, then M1 accelerates downwards, that means it's negative, while M2 accelerates upwards, positive, with the same magnitude. There is a song that is called Dear Boss, or The Signal, or Why Pat Is Not at Work Today, or The Bricklayer's Song, and it has other names. So it's an Irish folk song that was popularized by the Clancy brothers. And the version that I find illustrative, because there are many versions by many different groups, is on YouTube and uses Legos to illustrate the problem. A second example that I've chosen here is on what we call in physics uniform circular motion. That's an object that moves in a circular trajectory with constant speed, but the velocity, of course, it being a vector, it's changing all the time there. And you can show that the acceleration points inward, and therefore the net force points inward too, and it's equal to the mass times the square of the speed divided by the radius of the circle in there. So if you have an object where the force points to the center and has that value, it must be with constant speed and circular, of course. And there's a very nice segment of a French film called the 400 Flows that illustrate this phenomenon. And here it is. This is now usually the prior one, which you didn't hear the sound, unfortunately, was relatively, I don't use a full song. I use pieces of films or songs in there. So in this film, what you will see is people entering a cylindrical room, position themselves against the vertical wall, and then the room starts to spin. And when it has a large enough speed, they remove the floor from under the person. And that's popular in fairs or amusement park rides. Well, we also have the process of collision. Unfortunately, those videos are not going to be shared, but essentially it says that if you look at the bottom equation, you have that what we call the impulse. That means the average force times the time of collision, or usually if you have teaching an advanced class, that would be the integral of the force over on time. And that equals the change in what we call the momentum, which is the product of mass times the velocity there. So that equation says, for example, that if you have a fixed amount on the right-hand side, the left-hand side must match that number. Let's say that number is 10. There are many possibilities to do this. And you have, for example, if the time of collision is very small, then the average force has to be a little bit large there. And if the time of collision is very large, then the average force is small. It's like, for example, somebody slapping you in the face or caressing you there. When they caress you, it lasts for a relatively long time, and the average force is small. And I have some examples of collisions. Now on YouTube, you can find a lot of videos that are shot at high speed. And in the video that I am marking here, you particularly see the collision of a human head with a soccer ball. And you clearly see the deformation, extensive deformation of the face of the person on where the ball lands. Fortunately for us, we have what we call elasticity, and that elasticity that allows in a very short time, provided that hit is not extremely hard, allows the body to recover its original shape. The muscles go back to the original form, but if you look at the collision in a very high speed, you will see the big deformation that the face undergoes. And there are a lot of films that talk about collisions. You like Kung Fu movies, I recommend that movie Kung Fu Hustle, and particularly a collision that is seen on a certain frame of the film called Kung Fu Hustle, by the way. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have not fully adopted the metric system, and that brings us a loss of market share in the world, and also confusion there. So there's a film called Pulp Fiction, and you can see there how it confuses us in ordering food in Europe, for example. If you want a quarter pounder, you cannot say quarter pounder because they don't know what a pound is there. So you say Le Royal with cheese, and that's straight shown up very nicely in Pulp Fiction. Also, when you translate the song from English, for example, the song 100 Pounds of Clay, for the Latin American market, they don't use the pound, you have to use kilos, but 100 kilos is about 2.5 times bigger than 100 pounds. So in the American version, with 100 pounds, you create a woman, but with 250 pounds, you can create a man and a woman there. So you have to change the lyrics of the song. Reduction of air density with altitude. There is a very nice version of Come Fly With Me, which talks about going to the mountains in Peru, and the air is rarefied in there. Come fly with me, let's go where the air is rarefied there. Frank Sinatra made it very popular. And we talk about buoyant force and the particular case of a human body, where if you throw a dead human into water, at the beginning it sinks because his or her density is higher than the density of water. But as they decompose, the gases that they develop inside increase the volume of the person, and therefore the density decreases and the person comes up and floats. And that's illustrated very nicely in the song called Mac the Knife. I like the version that has the lyrics by Louis Armstrong there, or by Bobby Darin. So that is there. And vibrations, there are a lot of examples, of course. The song Good Vibrations comes to mind. But they're also using the human whistling as a simple harmonic oscillator, or the touching of the upper palate with your tongue, something like that. That's a damped oscillator. So you can watch those signals, for example, in real time. There's a very nice software called Audacity, which you can download for free. And you can then observe these signals very easily. For example, in the case of resonance, you have the Colorado to the Common Narrows Bridge. And the last example that I would like to mention is here, where if you try to do that in class, it could be dangerous because you essentially try to break a wine glass with your voice. And this is done in the video that I show you. A young child, about 10, 12 years old, breaks the glass, and luckily he doesn't cut his face, nor does his sister step in. So there are certain experiments that you cannot do in class, and YouTube is particularly useful in those cases. Thank you very much.